So today I am announcing 6 additional measures, and I'll go through them in a little bit of detail because I think that's important. For those of you that are looking at the numbers, you will see the number I announced is higher as part of the first measure I'm taking, and that's because of measure 2, in which we are carving in master's and PhD programs. So simply put, the international student cap is here to stay. Over the next 3 years, and I think this is important, we expect these changes to yield approximately 300,000 fewer study permits. A Canadian language benchmark, CLB, level 7 for university graduates and CLB 5 for college graduates will be required for anyone applying for post-graduation work permit on or after November 1st of 2024. We know that people that can speak the language are better equipped to succeed in Canadian society. This is a more stringent requirement that I think is very important if we are going to continue the successful story of integration of some of these people into Canadian society. Fourth, for prospective students applying on or after November 1st, post-graduation work permit eligibility will depend on the level of study. Graduates from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs will remain eligible for a work permit up to 3 years. These graduates are more likely to acquire transferable knowledge and skills and be able to adapt to changing economic circumstances over the long term. Over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 175,000 fewer postgraduate work permits. In the near future, we'll also take further measures to restrict eligibility to spousal open work permits. The 5th measure that I'm announcing today will be to further limit work permit eligibility to spouses of students in doctoral and certain master's select professional programs and certain pilot programs. And over the next 3 years, we expect that measure and these changes to yield approximately 50,000 fewer work permits for the spouses of students groups. And 6th, unrelated to students and postgraduate work permits, we'll also be limiting work permit eligibility to include only spouses of highly skilled, specialized workers such as C-suite executives, scientists, engineers, lawyers, professors, and technicians, or of workers in sectors where there are those key labor shortages. Spouses of workers in critical sectors like healthcare, construction will also obviously continue to be eligible for those work permits. As a quantitative measure, again, over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 100,000 fewer work permits. Again, I do stress that these are estimates and obviously will need to be tracked closely. Those measures that we have taken internally to be a little more restrictive on who gets visas, looking at countries where we are seeing people exploiting the visa system, that is to say that those that are claiming for asylum are not legitimate asylum claimants, is a challenge to the system, particularly given the volume of people that are looking to come to Canada. Again, as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right. If you compare the numbers of people that have come in, for example, in one country where we have had some of those challenges from India, we have seen those visas jump down from around 50,000 in January to less than 10,000 in August. Again, these are preliminary numbers, but it is an indicative sign that the measures that we have taken over the summer after discussions with my provincial colleagues are working. There's more work to do, and again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system, and it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border. I want to say one final word on what I believe to be, at least at the initial stages, a productive working group with a number of my colleague ministers of labor and immigration, skills training, depending on the title they hold in the province that they represent over the course of the summer. At the Council of the Federation, all of the premiers got together and said that we needed to work as a group to deal with the asylum challenge that this country is facing and that a lot of countries in our position are facing, particularly with respect to the unsustainable numbers of asylum seekers coming into Quebec and coming into Ontario. All premiers at that time agreed. We as a parallel process, had already started the idea of a working group with my colleagues from the provinces to deal with this. We asked ourselves a fundamental question as part of our working group: was what does a fair asylum system look like? That started first and foremost with the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that we are doing our role when it comes to bringing and addressing the number of asylum seekers coming into the country, but also the roles of the provinces that have the effective jurisdiction on some of the services that these asylum seekers seek to do their part. And they all agreed to do so. And with the chairmanship of the Government of Canada and the Government of Nova Scotia, we worked throughout the summer to look at different models of what could this system look like. I'm taking a little bit of time to give you some background because I currently no longer think that working group is actually helpful. I don't blame the bureaucrats in question. I don't blame the civil servants of our respective provinces and territories for having done their work. I don't blame my colleague ministers for putting their hearts into it. There was a lot of good faith at that table. But sadly, 3 particularly conservative ministers have stood up, the premiers of Nova Scotia, of New Brunswick and Alberta, and decided to weaponize this working group. They took a theoretical number of asylum seekers based on the last year's number of asylum seekers, divided it up by the population as they would, and assumed that the federal government would impose a number of asylum seekers on them. Let me restate, Ontario and Quebec are doing more than their fair share, and the other provinces need to step up. But there was no point in time where anyone said that the federal government was going to impose thousands of asylum seekers on unprepared provinces. I should probably give you the documents that they themselves leaked, because it would probably be quite helpful for your analysis. But this was a productive working group that has been weaponized by 3 premiers in particular for their re-election or their leadership review, and I think it's really irresponsible. Those provinces come knocking at my door for more immigrants. They are responsible for about 20% of permanent residency numbers through the provincial nominee program. Quebec has the entire control over its permanent residency program based on the Quebec-Canada Accord. And there is a responsible way of doing things. This was not responsible, and they threw their own ministers under the bus, and they've made this productive working group much less productive. It doesn't mean we're giving up. I question the pertinence of this group, given the fact that the documents have been leaked. It's unfortunate, but I do think there was good faith around the table, and we can work on an individual basis with these provinces to see which ones will stand up. There's money on the table. There's over $1 billion that we've committed to making sure that we have a system that makes sense. There are countries in Europe that have a system that makes sense. And indeed, the European Union has a system that, while they are facing different challenges than us, at least has some semblance of sense. So this is about a bunch of premiers who decided to weaponize the issue. Unfortunately, it's undermined the credibility of this committee, and obviously considering dissolving it. That's the last of the formal part of my presentation.